Greetings sailors and welcome to Supporter Spotlight number 33. I've decided to do an all Warships edition this time round because it's been a little while since I last did this. Every so often I do one of these just to get through a few more Warships replays because with the regular videos sometimes I do like 2 tanks replays in a Warships game, but obviously that means I can more easily get through the tanks games, and partly it's just the nature of Warships games. They tend to be longer, and even though you can maybe snip a bit here and there, this is going to be quite a long video still. This is going to be something around 40 minutes even with some fairly creative editing. This is also going to be an all-American edition. We've got 2 US battleships and a carrier game. I'm doing it by tier, so we're going tier 4, tier 6, tier 8. And it's going to be the Lexington at tier 8. That one's going to be interesting because I haven't covered a lot of carrier games. Now, I've done something a bit different with the editing there, and you'll see when we get to that match what it's like. But it's also going to be interesting from the point of view that I don't play a lot of carriers. I have a tier 6 US carrier, and I've got the tier 4 Japanese carrier. Haven't played much of either of them. And so my knowledge of high-tier carrier gameplay especially is distinctly limited. So I might end up completely talking out of my hat for that one. But I'm going to try and, make my best guesses as to what's going on and try and make it entertaining. I know carrier gameplay is not the most interesting to watch, but hopefully the editing I've done will speed things up a little bit. So we're starting off with AndyCx down in this tier 4 premium battleship, the Arkansas Beta, or Beta if you're British. I always say Beta, and I know the proper British pronunciation is Beta, but I don't know, in my head it's always Beta. So yeah, I don't know. There's one of those times when somehow the American pronunciation has just overwritten the British one in my brain. Anyway, so this was the premium ship you got as a reward for playing in the closed beta, the closed beta. That's just not, I'm gonna be like, just, I don't know, correcting myself every time let's just stick with calling it the Arkansas. So yes, it's basically a premium Wyoming, but the crucial difference with this is you can fit a lot of equipment upgrades to it. In fact, you get, is it 6 slots? 7? I can't remember. Normally, with most battleships, or most ships generally, you have to wait till kind of tier 8, 9, 10 before you get that many equipment slots. So this is the gimmick of the Arkansas. It is, in other regards, not especially remarkable. And like most tier 4 battleships, terrible AA. In this case, non-existent AA. It has an AA rating of 0. It has no anti-aircraft guns whatsoever. But because you can fit all those equipment upgrades to it, including the really expensive ones in some cases, spending 3 million credits on a single upgrade slot for a tier 4 ship might seem a bit daft, but you can do it. Once you have done that, the Arkansas is actually not half bad, although it's still no Imperator Nikolai. So in this particular game, Andy's in a tier 5 match, as you can see, and there is a carrier on each team. And having said, this thing has basically 0 anti-aircraft defensive armament. That's bad news if the carrier decides to come to him. It's just a case of can he dodge out of the way in time, basically. However, for now the enemy carrier is concentrating on other things. So this is the New Dawn map, I want to say. I think both of the battleship games are going to be on this map, if I remember correctly. And in this case it's domination, so they're contesting the cap points in the middle. He has come more north, but as you can see, it's him and an Emerald and a Phoenix, so they don't have a lot of presence up here. They've got most of the team down in the south around C, and then a couple of ships contesting B at the moment. And a lot of the enemy team, well, the enemy team's rather strung out across the map, actually. They don't seem to have any big one concentration. There's more ships near A than anywhere else, which is bad news for Andy, because this is not a fast ship. If he's going to get away, it's going to be rather a slow pace. But it's mostly enemy battleships up here, although there are a couple of, having said mostly enemy battleships actually, there's only 2 within firing distance and then 3 cruisers, so that would make it mostly cruisers, in fact, having said that. But yeah, the enemy battleships aren't especially fast either. It's a pair of Wyoming, so they're exactly as fast as he is, basically. So he's been having a pop at them so far. He's had some decent salvos. I mean, 2 citadels. It's not too bad. The Wyoming has at least a decent number of guns. It's probably, compared to the Miyogi, the better ship. I mean, the Miyogi has more flexibility in its speed, but just the amount of firepower you get with the Wyoming and the Arkansas is pretty nice, because of course the Miyogi's only got 3 twin turrets, and this has got, let's see, 6. So you've got literally double the amount of firepower, even if it's on a much slower ship. Of course, these days there's also the German tier 4 ship, the Kaiser, and that is pretty good as well. Although it's also not especially fast, but it's still faster than the US battleships. So this Wyoming is fairly low health. That makes him a nice ripe target, and Andy is, with his current angling, able to get 4 turrets around. He's actually waiting for his front turrets to turn as well, so then he'll be able to get a full broadside at this point. He's also got the Emerald nearby, so in principle, you know, that Emerald could pop smoke maybe, but there's no enemies that are especially close. I mean, the Kirov looked like he was maybe giving chase, but he's broken off to go into A, and he's fairly low health. And if Andy can nail that guy, I mean, broadside, that's a pretty tempting target, but at this kind of range, you know, he's approaching the maximum range of these guns. It's a little iffy as to whether he'll get anything, and really it was just a couple of overpens. So that Wyoming continues to live. I think he's just about outside of Andy's range at this point, so Andy's going to close the distance a little bit and see if he can get a bit closer. It would be nice. I mean, some of the more limited range battleships do, once you get up the tiers, have the option of spotter planes, but of course at tier 4 that just isn't a thing, sadly. It would be nice if you could, though. You could just pop a spotter plane in, and maybe, you know, once or twice in a battle you get that bit of extra range, and that maybe would make the tier 4s a little less painful when they get up tiered. But it's not as much as an issue as it used to be, because of course they don't see tier 6s anymore. And there we go, he gets the kill on that Wyoming. Of course, that change to the lower tier matchmaking did have a knock-on effect for everybody from tier 5 upwards, so it's kind of a mixed bag. It's nicer for the newer players going up through the lower tiers, but once you get to tier 5, suddenly the matchmaker is a bit harsher than it used to be, and you end up getting down-tiered a lot in your tier 5 and tier 6 ships, which makes tier 7 and tier 8 rather nice places to be these days. So again, another pop at Kirov. This is a much closer shot, and oh, well, that looked like it could have been nice, but just 2 pens there, unfortunately. There was the potential for that to have been a kill, but for shots like that, it really does come down to that battleship RNG, and there's not a lot you can do about it except just keep trying. And sometimes it's frustrating when it's a kill that you need to make. But if you're playing battleships expecting laser accuracy, then you're going to learn very rapidly that that is not the case, unless you only ever play the Imperator Nikolai, of course. So again, aiming for the Kirov, he's sailing behind the Emerald smoke, so he can't see anything right now. And he's actually getting hit fairly hard himself. There we go. The Kirov, completely misjudged where the Kirov might be, but the Kirov is a fast ship, of course. So he's using another heal. Takes the Kirov down, which is excellent. That thing has somewhat dangerous guns. I've played through the Kirov on the NA server now myself, and honestly I didn't like it that much. And the Budyoni is a nicer ship overall, but it's still... I don't know, the Soviet cruisers generally I'm struggling a little bit with, and it's probably for much the same reasons that I'm not a huge fan of the RN-like cruisers as well. It's just they're very, very easily deleted. Talking of RN cruisers being easily deleted, let's see if we can do this, do that even to this Danae. And it's a nice opportunity to do so. He's broadside, and there we go. Just completely blaps him out of the water. Meanwhile, an Isakaze appears. Now, he's just out of torpedo range. The guy might have put out torps already, but, well, we don't know. And this is from the last patch, this game as well. So this is the Isakaze with the fast 7-kilometer torps, because these days, now that we've hit patch 5.15, of course, the tier 4 and the tier 5 7-kilometer torps are a good deal slower than they were, which is probably a welcome change to anybody playing the low and mid tiers. Of course, it didn't affect the premium tier 5 destroyers, so those are still very, very dangerous machines, especially as premiums people will tend to put their experienced IJN destroyer captains in them. So yeah, it's not nice running into one of those to discover that they've got a concealment expert captain and the fast torpedoes that the regular destroyers no longer have. So the enemy have, at this point, an advantage in both points and cap circles, so they really do need to retake B. But on numbers, they are relatively even. They've got basically the same number of ships left. So they can't really afford to lose any more. And if they can take out some in the process, well, that's kind of an obvious thing to say, really, isn't it? But if they can take out that Wyoming, for instance, that's worth a good chunk of points. The Danae is not that much of a threat. What else have they got left alive? They've got another Danae, they've got a Wyoming to the west, and of course their carrier. Oh, there we go, that was a nice citadel. So, of the remaining ships, none of them is especially threatening, apart from potentially the carrier, because, specifically in the case of Andy, of course, as I've said, he has basically 0 AA defense. So the Wyoming in the west has followed the path that Andy took earlier, going around the outside of that island. The other two, well, the Kaiser's taken out the Miyogi, which is useful, and that basically leaves the B point open to being capped, which is really what they need to do. Now, killing the Miyogi's obviously narrowed the gap in points a little bit, but they do still need, ideally, a cap circle. We've skipped on a little bit here. Now, that Danae that was near the B circle has died in the interval. There's also one more towards the C cap circle who hopefully should get taken down. I mean, there's a Phoenix there, and the Kaiser might well be pointing his guns in that direction as well. Andy, meanwhile, has used his last heal, or he's on his last heal, and he's now engaging in a somewhat long-distance gunnery duel with this Wyoming, who has a hit points advantage for now, so angling becomes important at this point. However, the Wyoming is more interested, obviously, in trying to hit the Emerald, who is a very soft target indeed. I always feel a bit sympathetic whenever I'm playing, especially the mid-tiers, because I've got a couple of ships that I'm grinding at tier 6 at the moment, and I meet one of these RN cruisers, especially the tier 5 and below ones, and I just end up deleting them because there's not a lot they can do about it, and their fire in return is largely ineffective, especially if you're in a battleship. Even in a cruiser, you just have to angle a bit and you can really quite easily negate their firepower. So that's another reason why I don't especially want to go down that line. The Soviet cruisers, at least, you know, they may be also very, very easy to knock out of action, but they get HE shells. And of course, once you get to tier 6 and above, it's quite fast firing, fast velocity HE shells, so that does make really quite a difference. So for a bow-on shot, that was pretty good. That salvo also got him a Confederate medal. So that's his second of the game. He's approaching 70k at the moment. But his angling is not exactly ideal right now. However, the enemy Wyoming doesn't have a broadside, so the potential for doing a bunch of damage was rather limited. So Andy is angling himself. The Wyoming is trying to bring his broadside firepower to bear, but of course that opens him up for broadside shots for Andy. And although he clips one or two into the mountain there we go, an 8k hit. So that wasn't completely awful. His own health is not too bad as well. So it's looking more comfortable at this point. I mean, the enemy carrier still could be decisive, but he's here with the Emerald and the Kaiser, and although the Emerald might well die, between himself and the Kaiser, surely they can take this guy down. Well, fingers crossed. They have, at this point, really, like, the gap is kind of narrow. They've really brought it to a point where one kill will make a significant difference. And not that there's many enemy ships left to kill at this point, of course, but if they can just get ahead, I mean, they're running out of time. It's less than 3 minutes. If they can just get ahead and then survive till the timer runs down. Because if the battle ended at this moment, the enemy team would win despite them having the ship advantage. So they really have to kill this guy. And if they can kill the carrier as well, that would be nice. But they have to kill this guy and they have to not lose any more ships. And in the case of the Emerald, that might be tricky just because he's clearly going to make himself a very attractive target. So the enemy carrier, we've skipped on ahead a little again. The enemy carrier has been seen going to A, and the Kaiser's going in there. So they've broken up a little bit, but that's fine. However, Andy does finish off that guy, but he takes a bit of punishment in the process. He was showing quite a lot of broadside there. That did mean, however, he was able to use most of his firepower and was just able to wipe out that Wyoming. So that's fine. That has now put them at a significant advantage. I mean, they were probably going to catch up with holding 2/3 of the cap circles anyway, but that absolutely secures it for them. Because if they'd lost the Emerald, that might still have kept it just in the team's favour for long enough. So with a minute to go, it's just the enemy carrier left. And of course, I should have pointed out, that was a Kraken for Andy, so that was a rather nice final medal to get. So this Hosho is surely not going to last. The Kaiser is pulling to very close range. He's still got quite a lot of health, actually. Maybe Andy will get this kill, maybe not. We're down to about the 30-second mark, but it doesn't matter because they just hit 1,000 points. So the enemy carrier managed to live because of the victory point timer. Victory point timer? You know what I mean. Anyway. So Andy, as we can see with his 5 kills, was top of the team. 1400 base XP, which is not half bad considering the matchmaking. He was quite lucky in that the carrier didn't come for him. A more experienced, maybe I should say, a seal clubbing Hosho player might well have prioritised him as being an easy to kill target because no AA, and it's not like at tier 4 and tier 5 there are any especially amazing cruisers in terms of AA. So all in all, that was a pretty good result. Next we have Manti 111 in the New Mexico, so we're jumping up 2 tiers. Although it's still, it's still a ship of that era. It's still a fairly slow ship, but the New Mexico is a fan favourite, and it's a fan favourite for a reason. All the tier 6 battleships are pretty good, and that's a good thing these days because they get down tiered a lot, as I've said before. So being able to hold your own even in higher tier games is fairly useful. Now in this case it is, I think, a tier 7 game, but there's lots of tier 6s around, so the matchmaking is actually pretty decent. And we've also got the standard version of New Dawn, so same map but different game mode, and that's going to lead to a rather different style of play. This is also an older replay if you're wondering why the minimap looks different. So first big hits of the game into that Omaha, and he's now just been deleted. Omahas are nice ships, maybe less nice these days now that the matchmaking is a bit less kind, but you can't do that in an Omaha. You have to use your range and your maneuverability to dance around. You can't chug along broadside in front of enemy battleships because it basically will end like that. They do not have a lot of armour. So going to see if he can repeat that against the rather jerkily moving Atlanta, but that's going to be down to the replays. As I said in the, was it the Farragut video? I can't remember what version of the game this is from, but replays really have come along ways. And it's kind of interesting watching slightly older replays sometimes and seeing the like ships behaving oddly or the UI elements behaving oddly, and even just the general effects that can, you know, like AA effects and smoke and fire, anti-aliasing and all that kind of thing. Like the game really has improved rather a lot, just graphically speaking. Although it would be nice if they would finally at some point get round to optimizing the rather clunky and janky UI. It's most noticeable in the port, but for carrier players it's also been a continued bugbear, because when you're trying to rapidly issue orders to your air groups and the UI just will not keep up with you, that can be a major pain in the arse, especially at the higher tiers, when being able to rapidly respond to what the enemy carrier doing is rather important. So yeah, hopefully Wargaming, the Leicester studio, will make that a priority at some point, because it's been an issue for a while. Having said, some things have improved, you know, some things haven't improved. So more Citadels. He deleted the, I think it was the Omaha, and that was a nice hit into the Atlanta, which is always a slightly dangerous ship if you're in a slow battleship, because if they can find an island to sit behind, they can cause you a serious mischief. He's also getting a chance to put his AA to work here with the enemy air group coming overhead. There's 2 carriers in this game. This is another reason why the New Mexico is nice. It's got a pretty solid AA suite for a tier 6 ship. So even with 2 carriers in the game, if you get, say, a tier 8 carrier making a concerted effort to kill you, they quite possibly will, but tier 7 carriers and tier 6 carriers, you've at least got a decent chance of inflicting some casualties on their planes, and over the course of a battle, even if you only shoot down, you know, 12, 15 planes, that's still going to be, you know, planes that the enemy carrier has to replace, and over the course of a battle that can make the difference. So another Omaha, and it's a bit of a more long-range shot, not quite at the edge of his range, but getting towards it. But with again, with American battleships, you know, the number of shells you can put out is quite nice, and unfortunately in that case the guy is able to successfully maneuver, which is, you know, if you can do that with the Omaha, if you can stay at the longer ranges and just dance around, then you can do rather successfully. Meanwhile, 1 hit from a torpedo, but no flooding, so no need to use this repair. Another nice feature of the New Mexico is it's got rather nice torpedo bulges, so the airdrop torpedoes, you know, if you take 1 odd hit like that, it's not that dangerous. But, you know, multiple hits can be, obviously. Multiple airdrop torpedoes are dangerous from any ship. So the Omaha playing with his speed and manoeuvring a bit there. He's already lost a bit of health, but that manoeuvring is able to avoid more incoming shots. So he gets to live for a little bit longer. There's quite a force here pushing on the enemy cap. They're really exerting some pressure. There are some enemy ships near their own cap, however, so they've got to be a little bit careful. Sometimes, I mean, on maps where the caps are quite close together, you can end up with a big rush towards the enemy cap, and then you glance down at the mini-map and suddenly realise that there's like 3 or 4 ships that are about to start capping your own cap with nobody to defend, and then you all have to turn around and try and do something about it, at which point it might go badly wrong, or it might not. You never quite know. So they have to not be overconfident here. And in fact, there's already, I think, a couple of ships, just judging from the new map, that are heading back towards their own cap. So, yes, they're making a strong push, but it's starting to fragment a bit. It does, however, mean that the enemy team has to take a bit of initiative. So, some nice broadside, I said broadside? That's not a word. Broadside shots on the Nagato. No citadels, but a bit more damage. And that is probably the more attractive, or the most attractive target right now, because he's relatively broadside. There is, however, an enemy New Mex that's coming back towards their cap, so we might have to deal with him at some point. He's also about to enter the cap circle, which makes him suddenly a more attractive target, because everyone's going to go, oh my god, he's capping, and start shooting at him potentially. And possibly he's aware of this, because he's actually slowing and changing course. his intention is clearly not to try and cap. He'd be taking fire from too many angles for that to be effective. But he's also seeking at the same time to position himself so he's not giving broadside to anybody unnecessarily. So he decides to get his firepower trained on that new mech that's... Well, he kind of was coming back, and now he's angling north a bit. But he is reasonably low health, so if he can knock this guy out, that is dangerous fire from one less direction to worry about. And there we go. Nice series of hits, so that's fine. He no longer has to worry about getting whacked from the south. However, having entered the cap circle, yeah, he's now attracting fire from multiple ships and a carrier. Well, I say multiple ships, I think it's mostly just the Omaha. Because the new mech was firing at him as well, but of course he's been taken out at this point. So there go the dive bombers. Doesn't look like it's both carriers trying to take him out. I mean, that was probably the Rangers' planes. 3 fighters and dive bombers. That was almost certainly a Ranger. The other, the Japanese carrier, there we go. Dunk one more Omaha. He looks like he's concentrating his firepower in the north. It's Hiryu, there we go. I've just seen the minimap label. So, yeah, that wasn't so bad. He avoided taking any serious damage there. Of course, he's still in the cap circle, which might get him another round of air attacks, but at this point he could maybe potentially choose to just sit here and accumulate cap points. But like I said, I don't think his intention is to cap. He'd rather do more damage. His damage count's actually reasonably respectable at this point, 84k. So again, we've jumped on a little. I don't know what I said again. We haven't actually done any jump cuts in this replay so far, anyway. But yeah, he's just pulled in range of the Hiryu. The remaining enemy non-carriers were basically swept up. I mean, his team managed to retain the initiative, and the enemy team really never did seriously threaten their own cap. So they were able to push round, push through, and it's now just the enemy carriers left. So if he can land some shots here, he might maybe do some more damage, get another kill, and in an effort to aid that, he pops his own spotter plane so he can get better range. And when you're trying to fire at somebody in over an island like this, having that spotter plane point of view can actually be beneficial. Although, as anybody that's used the spotter plane knows, sometimes judging the movement when in the spotter plane view can actually be a bit more difficult. And it's probably because it's just different. If you were using the spotter plane point of view, this kind of diagonal point of view, the whole time, you'd probably get used to it fairly quickly, but it's because it's just intermittent, I think. Judging the motion just becomes a little bit more difficult because it's not what you're used to compared to the normal artillery view. So that Hiryu is slowed right down, trying to use the island as cover, but of course for Manti that doesn't matter right now. He's got fairly clear shots over the island. There's also a kamikaze that's about to come round who is probably trying to, having to dodge all kinds of air attacks and torpedo runs and bomb drops. But yeah, there's no way they haven't won. It's just a matter of who can get these final kills. And it's the kind of situation where, because it's not a domination mode, the shift in points from one team to the other has all been based on kills. So they're easily going to have enough time to wipe the entire enemy team. So the Hiryu's done, and it's just that independence. Oh, it's an independence, not a ranger. So I was completely wrong there. I was getting my carriers mixed up. So it was a tier 7 Japanese carrier and a tier 6 American carrier, not the other way around. I don't know why I thought it was, anyway, a ranger. Just because I saw all the planes, I suppose. So yeah, this independence is now alone, on fire, doomed, basically. And it's just a case of who can get the killing blow. And as it turns out, it's going to be Manti. So he gets that final kill. 100k damage at the end there, 4 kills, and a fairly respectable result. I mean, that was pretty good. That was a nice, solid New Mexico game. And that was enough to put him at the top of the team. Now, score-wise, that was better than solid. 1900 is pretty damn nice. He almost broke the 2k base XP barrier. Not quite, but almost. And considering there weren't that many high-tier ships to shoot at, that actually was pretty respectable. And he didn't, of course, have any capping XP. I don't think you get capping XP in the or bonus capping XP in the regular game mode. I'm pretty sure that's just restricted to domination mode. Not entirely certain. So at last we come to Redman36. Now this is a familiar name from my World of Tanks supporter spotlight videos. You might maybe remember him as an artillery player. I mean, I've showed other games of his, but I've also showed 1 or 2 RTV plays, I think. He's the guy that I started playing on the NA server for, basically, and he decided he wanted to try out warships. He was getting a bit kind of fed up with tanks, I think it's fair to say, and decided, you know, Jedi's been doing all these warships videos, he'd seen some other people, you know, I recommended some YouTubers to him, and he decided to give it a go. Now, perhaps naturally he gravitated towards carriers, but I think it's a slightly pejorative to equate arty and carriers as being exactly the same. Carriers are a lot more skill-based. There are some similarities, I have to say. You know, it's indirect gameplay. But whereas even with artillery, you get 2 skilled artillery players, and you might laugh at the notion of a skilled artillery player, but an artillery player that knows their machine, that knows the maps, that knows, you know, the correct priorities of targets to aim for, you might still have, even with an equal matchup of players, wildly different results because of the sheer amount of RNG involved in artillery and water tanks. Whereas in carriers, it's a lot more skill dependent. Now, there's still RNG, especially when it comes to dive bomber drops, but the difference between a skilled carrier player playing against an unskilled carrier player can be, you know, it can be a vast gulf. It can really make a difference to a team. Whereas if you get 2 relatively skilled carrier players against each other, you know, that can be a really tense, close fought thing. Now, in this case, in the Lexington, he's playing the Strike Lexington with no carriers. The enemy Lexington, I don't know what his setup is, but he has got 2 fighters, so it might be a balanced setup or it might be an airstrike Lexington. Airstrike, air superiority, I know what I mean. So, in other words, it is vital that he knocks out this enemy Lexington. He has to. Now, sometimes, I mean, carrier knockouts are a little harder these days, and you can see that Lexington is using his defensive AA. But it's still possible, it's still more than possible to knock out an enemy carrier if you do it right. And you'll see here, he's not sending his dive bombers in all at the same time. He's sending them in one after the other in waves. And so, although he sacrificed 1 squad of torp bombers already, and he got their fighters' attention with that, he also sent his dive bombers around searching for the carrier. Now, he's lost 2 squads of the dive bombers, but he was able to... what he's done is basically gotten the guy to use his defensive AA, gotten the guy to use his repair, because he burned for a while. And now, finally, he sent his final squad in. 3 hits, 2 fires, crucially. Now, fires are RNG, and he's going to lose that squad entirely. But look at that ticking damage. This enemy Lexington is done for. Those 2 fires are going to burn him out. And at that point, he doesn't have to worry about enemy fighters anymore. So, even though with the US carriers, the non-RNG damage element is basically tied to your torpedo bombers, of course, the US carriers get superior dive bombers. They have a better chance of getting hits and doing damage and setting fires. Actually, I don't know if that's true about fires, but you have a better chance of getting hits than you do with the Japanese dive bombers. And he's also got the captain's skill that gives him an extra bomber per dive bomber squad as well. So, the enemy Lexington is done for, and that not only helps him out, but it helps out his team as well. And it now means he is free to just go after whatever targets he wants. This is predominantly a tier 8 game, but there are some tier 10s around, and he's still got to pick and choose his targets quite carefully. And it's kind of funny because when we're playing together, he'll say, "Oh, should I go after this or should I go after that target?" And I kind of roughly know what has the dangerous AA and what doesn't, but at this stage, he probably has a better idea than I do. Now, there might be, I don't know, really obvious mistakes he makes during the course of this replay. To my untutored eye, it seems like he's doing things relatively well. I mean, he's paying attention to when people are using defensive AA. He's paying attention to when people are using their repairs. And especially with the dive bombers, he is staggering his attacks so he can get that ticking fire damage. And when you're using the Strike Lexington, that is probably the most important damage component with your dive bombers, is not the bomb hits themselves, but setting fires, especially if you can set multiple fires. And if you can just be patient enough to wait for people to use their damage repair, their damage repair party, then once they have, a smart player will hold off if they've got 1 or 2 fires from bomb hits, maybe. But if you leave it long enough, maybe they'll go, "Oh, okay, they're not going to send more planes after me," but you're paying attention and you send in more, and then suddenly you get some ticking fire damage out of it. So, yeah, with the bomb hits and the torpedo hits, he's only had 4 torpedo hits, and with the fires, over 100k damage, and he's now got some ticking fire damage on this enemy Zao. This, by the way, this is the editing thing that I'm decided to do, and I'm not 100% sure if it works well or not, but basically, instead of doing jump cuts, I think I've done 1 jump cut in this replay, but for the rest of it, it's just speeding up the bits in between where he's making his drops, so it doesn't drag out so long. Now, that was his one really duff drop. He basically dropped it too close to the Zao, so the torpedoes, there was 1 hit, but the torpedo didn't arm from what I could tell on the screen, or it might just be that there was a gap with the torpedo drop. I think it was a hit that didn't arm, but I'm not 100% certain. But it's still his dive bombers that are doing the most damage here. Now, this is a reasonably close game, but they do definitively have the upper hand at this point. The main group of his forces is to the west, and he's meanwhile moving around to the north. So his planes have got further to go. This might be one of the things where, I mean, I've played with experienced carrier players, and I think it's probably quite a hard judgment to make, but looking at the minimap and trying to stay as close as possible to the action, so you minimise the flight time back and forth. But of course, if you misjudge it, if you get too close, you might end up just, getting obliterated by enemy gunfire. So there we go, there's a Witherer medal, which he's had Arsonist already as a result of killing the enemy carrier, and I think Witherer is for doing damage. Is that flooding damage, or is that just flooding and fire damage? It might be. Either way, I mean, he's got his sights set on this Bismarck, so this guy is not having a good day. So there's the torp drop, and he gets the kill. And is that another Arsonist medal? I don't know. Can you get multiple awards for Arsonist in the same game? I don't know, or if that was just a display bug in the replay. So, 166k damage. The enemy team, there we go, the Zao gets taken down. The enemy team has got 1 ship left at this point, and it's going to turn out... Well, he's still in the cap circle in oh no, he was in the B cap circle. He's not in the B cap circle anymore, and here we go. He gets spotted, so this guy has to be fairly close, and there he is. However, he's got dive bombers in the air now, so because they're US dive bombers, even if this is an AA gearing, and it doesn't look like it is an AA gearing, a defensive AA gearing, there we go, the bombs get the kill. And so he gets that final bit of damage. I don't have score screens, unfortunately. This was... Redman uploaded the game to WoW's Replays, which is a very useful site. That's, I believe, Jamin's run. That's the site that he runs. It doesn't pull the score screens from replays automatically. Or it doesn't pull scores from replays automatically. It is quite useful in that it's less space taken up in my inbox, but you still have to, with that website, remember to take the score screens yourself at the end of a battle and upload. So I don't know what his XP was, I don't know what his position on the team was, but I can tell you he had 166k damage and 3 kills at the end of that, along with the 2 medals. So to my eyes, that seems like a relatively successful Strike Lexington game. There might have been some mistakes in there. I honestly don't know enough of the high tier carrier gameplay to say, but overall, it seemed pretty good, and I hope I was able to make it relatively interesting. A bunch of people might have just stopped the video at the point where it became the carrier replay, but of those of you that stuck around, I'll be interested to know if I was able to sufficiently make this something worth watching. So anyway, there we go. That's the last of our replays for today. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video overall. And if you have, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, stay tuned for more.